Southeastern 14 is presented by BetOnline, which has been your tournament bracket headquarters all tournament season. A lot more in store for you in sports this year with BetOnline. MLB is here, NBA, NHL playoffs are around the corner. As always, BetOnline is the number one source for your spring and summer sports wagering. Head to BetOnline today. Stay updated on all the action. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE. That is BLEAV for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. I'm Chris Lee, joined by Chase Robinson here. Chase, Vandy, let's go back to this time last year. Everybody was looking at Vanderbilt and saying, all right, Clark Lea, year two, he beat Kentucky. He beat Florida in November. That was a sign of things to come. I'm in Nashville, and I know people around that program have covered them, and I think that they look back on last year now or 2 years ago and say, hey, maybe winning a couple of games was a little premature where they were. They caught some breaks those games. I think there was a realization last year when they went to UNLV and got beaten in a game where they were a slight favorite that, hey, maybe we got a little bit out over our skis with the end of 2022. They won a lot of games won a couple of games with Mike Wright as their quarterback. They went to more of a pro-style passing attack. Didn't work. A.J. Swan's now gone. Now Vanderbilt's going to try to rebuild in an era of SEC football that's tougher than it's ever been. But they're going kind of money ball. They're going to go mobile quarterback, maybe shorten the game. Let's see if we can beat people that way, because that's how they won a couple of games at the end of the 2022 season. Hey, you got to try something. I don't think that's a bad strategy.
I don't think so either. I mean, you got to make adjustments where you think you need to be successful. I mean, they're 2-22 in the SEC under Clark Lea. I mean, those are not good numbers. You've got to do something. You've got to change things up a little bit to win some more games, to add some more to that front number that I mentioned. And so, you think about Vanderbilt, who they've had some good coaches over the years. They're in a different era now, as is all of college football. So, Chris, you think about it, how can Vanderbilt approach the portal? How can they approach the NIL, things like that, to grow this football program and make it better?
Yeah, I think Vanderbilt is always slow to adapt in anything, and that's one reason that it's just been so tough for them to win. They're always going to have tougher academic standards than anybody. The transfer portal has made it tougher because Vanderbilt's the one school in the SEC you can only transfer in 60 hours. So junior transfers, senior transfers, you're going to lose a year or two if you come to Vanderbilt. That makes it tough. Getting into grad school is tougher. I feel like Clark Lea had a plan here where it was they're going to identify guys out of high school that they run them through measurables and say, all right, an NFL linebacker needs to be able to run a 40 in this amount of time and do all these things. And they kind of line up their recruiting and saying, all right, this is what an NFL level athlete looks like. Let's go find guys that fit that athletic profile that we can get into school. It's not worked so far. The portal has made it where they're trying to build a roster with kids doing that, and they're facing kids on the other sideline 4th, 5th, 6th years that they can't get in school at Vanderbilt. That's made his rebuild a lot tougher. Feels like just when he got there and was settled into a plan, the whole world got flipped upside down. They were slow to adapt to that. Administratively, they were slow to adapt to NIL. Now they've gone and they've hit some kids in the portal. They've landed some defensive linemen. They'll be in their rotation. And probably the biggest thing is quarterback. Nate Johnson is their starter for the spring, transfer from Utah, 10'3", 100-meter guy. Throwing is a little questionable. They got Diego Pavia coming in from New Mexico State in May. And if you know that name, Auburn knows him well.
Yes.
He went to Auburn and beat those guys in their building. He's a guy that can throw a little bit, ran almost 1,000 yards a year ago at New Mexico State, a program that is not used to walking into SEC stadiums and winning. So I think Vanderbilt, you're going to see a little bit of shift here, going back to, all right, we won with the mobile quarterback a couple of years ago. You had a migration from Las Cruces, New Mexico. Not only did you bring Diego Pavia, you brought on his backup, Blaise Berlowitz. You brought on his head coach, Jerry Kill, who's now kind of the head coach of the offense there. You brought in his offensive coordinator, Tim Beck. They are kind of moneyballing it a different way now and saying, all right, we're going to try to do it with the kind of talent and a pro-style offense that everybody else was doing. Now we're going back to actually one of some games a couple years ago with mobile quarterbacks on the roster. That is the plan in Nashville.
And looking at their schedule, I mean,
Whew.
Vanderbilt obviously used to playing in the SEC East, but now you'll see some of those teams on their schedule still, like Kentucky and Missouri. But now you got Alabama, you got Auburn, you got Texas, LSU, all those guys on the schedule now, which elevates the schedule up another notch for the Commodores.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. You look at it. I think that Virginia Tech game, as we switch around here a little bit, but since we're talking schedule, that's going to be a big one. That's probably going to be a game where Vanderbilt's a slight underdog. And I don't know that Vanderbilt has to win it to show improvement. Now, if it does, that's a big boost of confidence. But that, to me, is a little bit of a harbinger game. They've come out of an offseason of a rebuild, and that is one that's, more a fair fight than, say, September 21st when they go to Missouri or October 5th when Vanderbilt hosts Alabama. To me, that one is one to circle because that might tell us a lot about how successful Clark Lea's attempt at a different kind of rebuild is here.
Yeah, I think so, and it's going to be important for Vanderbilt to win the games they can, to get some confidence. And you're right, I don't think they necessarily have to win that Virginia Tech game, but that's a kind of a scene setter, if you will, of maybe how the season can go and how they can play in that game, how they respond to the offseason and the portal additions and everything. So, yeah, I think they can start it out at a good note in that Virginia Tech game, but the schedule is brutal, and they've got to win the games that they can in this tough schedule.
Yeah, one thing that stuck out to me, Chase, the job has gotten tougher since Clark Lea took it. The portal, all the things that kind of exploded and blown up the way they wanted to build it. And they had a good defensive coordinator year one under Clark Lea, Jesse Minter, left for Michigan where they won a national title. So always hard for him to keep coaches. I feel like his coordinators were not SEC level. I think they've gotten better guys. And oh, by the way, now he's going to lead his own defense as Clark Lea and had a pretty good run of doing that at Notre Dame where he was the defensive coordinator before he came to Vanderbilt. So I like that change. Some of the Vanderbilt teams in the last 30 years that have been competitive didn't play much offense, but they won with defense. So I don't think his defense is as talented as some of their better ones. I look at them and I go, I don't know if there's a ton of NFL players on there, but two things that stand out to me. I think they got more bodies on the defensive line. When James Franklin was in Nashville and shocking people with the number of games they won, one thing they did is they had 9 or 10 defensive linemen who they could rotate out and keep fresh. And they started for once winning games in the fourth quarter then. I don't know that these guys are as talented as those guys were, but I think they got more bodies. Haven't seen them in the spring. That they brought in some guys that had played some successful snaps at other places. They got a little bit of experience there and some guys that are returning on the roster. That's number one. Number two, they couldn't cover me and you the last couple of years. I think they've got a little bit more experience at cornerback. They got a kid named Martell Height who returns. He'll be their best corner. They had a couple of kids in the portal who will come in and either start or give them depth that have had success other places. And they got a linebacker named Langston Patterson who's one to watch. He is all over the field. He is maybe their next star linebacker. I don't know that there's any all-SEC players on this defense, but I haven't seen them a little bit in the spring. And knowing that Clark Lea is in charge of that group now, I think they got a little bit more of a shot and should be better on that side of the ball this year.
And I've always thought he's a great defensive mind. When he was at Notre Dame, I thought Clark Lea was a great defensive coordinator, and I thought when Vanderbilt made the hire that, yeah, he was going to take their defense places it hasn't been before. And does he still have a chance to do that? I think so. And, I'm glad to see as I look at them that their defense, that they do have some depth, that they are adding some guys and putting some pieces in there on defense. Because if they can play defense in this league, then that will definitely help their chances, and especially, like I mentioned, the schedule that they have.
I think the NIL and the adaptability portion are going to be interesting. NIL in particular, because Vanderbilt has got the second biggest endowment in the league behind Texas A&M. And I don't know who's third. I think it's maybe Florida. I could be wrong. But I think the gap between Vanderbilt and whoever number 3 is pretty big. And you're like, what do endowments have to do with this? It points to the ability to raise money. Chase, if you've ever been downtown in Nashville before, you can walk to places on Broadway and start seeing names on buildings of families who donate to their collectives. They're kind of interesting to watch because, and look at Vanderbilt, you're going to have to pay a premium in the portal. Because if I go to you and say, all right, Chase, I'm at Vandy, you can get $250,000 to play at Alabama. The price tag to do that at Vandy, if I make you the same offer, it's I know where you're going to go. So you're paying a premium probably on top of it. But I think that's the one thing with them that's interesting to watch. Number 2, the facilities. If you go by the building, the stadium's going to be a lot smaller. It's going to be a lot nicer. They got construction girders going up, holes everywhere. It's like trying to get through a maze as a mouse over there right now. They get everything boarded off. But there are a couple of things. The construction is tangible, and the NIL is a little bit of an under-the-radar thing to watch for them, because they've got billionaires out there that are donating to their collective. Mark Cuban's daughter goes to school there. There's been some talk that he's given to their collective. I'm not going to say watch out for Vandy as a sleeper. They're an up-and-coming SEC program. We've seen too much history to say something like that, but the latter can still be true. They've got a lot of money out there kind of in the background where they're maybe a little bit more of a wild card than you might think considering the history.
And I think that's how they're going to have to handle things now. I mean, we're learning in this day and age in college football that the more money you have, the better things go for you sometimes. And so if they can take advantage of that, go that route, get some guys out of the portal, work NIL the way that they can, I think that's going to really, really help Vanderbilt for sure.
Yeah, I think the big thing for them is just finding confidence somewhere, right? If they beat Virginia Tech off the bat this year, that's a bigger win than they got any time last year. You do that, you should get Alcorn State in week 2. Then you're 2-0 going to Georgia State, which just lost its head coach. I don't care if Vanderbilt beats me and you. If Vanderbilt starts 3-0 and heads to Missouri at 3-0, there's going to be a little bit more confidence there. There's still going to be an underdog for that one. Then you got a week off to get ready for what Alabama brings. But if you don't lose your confidence there, you got a game at Kentucky, which you won the last time you played there. You got a Ball State team at home that you should be favored to beat if you've had a decent season. And then, at Auburn, South Carolina, those programs aren't where the best of those programs have been the last decade. Look, anytime you play in the SEC, it's going to be a tough schedule. And the odds are Vanderbilt is not going to have a winning season. But if they get off to a good start and get some confidence and not just have it crushed by midseason, then I think Clark Lea's got a little bit more of a shot at a rebuild than we felt he had exiting last year.
Yeah, for sure. And confidence is big. I mean, in any sport, especially when you're dealing with college kids, in a game of football. If they could get some of these wins to start the season off, give them confidence, because you look back to the past, 2-22 in the SEC under Clark Lea. I mean, that doesn't give you a lot of confidence, but if they can get some wins and at least play well, compete in even in these tough SEC games, I think this will give this team a lot of confidence. And I think that'll show, hey, some of the guys out there maybe at smaller schools or aren't getting to play at some of the bigger schools, like, hey, I can come to Vanderbilt and be a part of something and compete in these games. And I think that would show a lot to these recruits and some of the guys that they're trying to get.